Hey guys, welcome back to the Arthritis Podcast, official podcast of digital and creative media works, where each week we take some from pop culture and try to break it down to better understand it. My name is David.
Hi, I'm tired.
You can't do that every time it's a late episode. The joke's not funny.
But it is late and I am tired.
What's your name?
It's Ben.
It's Ben. Oh,
Hey.
This is Ben. Hello.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
How's it going?
Are you
good?
asking me or are you just like...
No, yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty good.
Yeah?
I really enjoy what we just watched. I'm kind of in a good mood. I had a lot of fun. I love these films. This week we're just kind of talking about stuff that we like. We stopped punishing ourselves for a while, and we're not doing things that have like this like super complex meaning that we have to unpack and gives us a migraine. We're just talking about fun stuff that we like. And
this
still overthinking it, but like, you know, it's
what we do.
But it's what we do. But the stuff we're covering doesn't need that, but we're gonna do it anyway. This week, it came out today. I think it comes out tomorrow everywhere else in the world. So
got that early.
Got that freshness. Actually, this is going to be a fresh month because we had Endgame last month, and then it's going
to be a month of exclusive
looks. Live
early
exclusive.
looks.
I've noticed that everything we've covered this month has the word noir in its genre description, which is an interesting trend. This week we're talking about the genius of John Wick Chapter 3, Parabellum. Parabellum. Fuck, I had a good time.
Yeah?
When we talked about John Wick 2, the overwhelming feeling that I have about these films is you watch it, it's like watching a train wreck. You watch it and you're like, you can't look away from what's all going on.
It's like a really good train wreck.
It's a really cool looking train wreck.
It's like a cool train wrecking in a cool way.
Yeah,
everyone dies.
Everyone dies. I love these films so much.
It's just a clean.
It's just everybody's dead. Yeah, it's kind of interesting who doesn't die in this one, but
right.
Yeah, I think we'll probably touch on that because there's something to the element of plot armor in this world that doesn't feel like plot armor.
And then there's literal armor.
Which doesn't save you from guns. Well, it saves you from guns, but not from John Wick.
Yeah, it's all a bit interesting.
Yeah, if you didn't, I mean, obviously, it's a neo-noir action thriller, and it is the third one. I thought it was going to be the final chapter, but it seems
but they're just, I guess they realize they've got something that prints money.
It's a simple formula, and it seems to work.
Yeah, like this is, I don't know, they're doing like the Bourne format, where it's just like it keeps going, and it's not like...
They're just going to keep going until it's bad?
Well, they haven't run out of space to move the stakes, because I felt like they ran out of space at the end of the first film, and then they kept going, and then the end of the second film, you're like, there's no they're gonna do one more, but like there's no way there's gonna be another one after that, because it's literally like he's excommunicado, it's a big deal.
Then they raise the stakes again.
Yeah, in this film they're like, no, we can just keep going, it's fine.
It's kind of impressive that they can do that with their world building, and
make it like logical
and make it feel like it makes sense.
Yeah.
It's a curious one. Before we get into the summary, what did you think? Did you really enjoy it?
Oh yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
It's just I mean, I don't think it's as good as the first one.
Is it just that the first one was so fresh?
The first one was just so fresh and just like so new. And this one did, I mean, we're probably going to talk about it, but like the action's just kind of different. Like they're different flavor of action.
Whereas, the first two definitely had the second one especially had a very consistent flavor of action. Yeah. Whereas this one, I feel like they went the other direction.
Yeah, they did more of a...
For better or for worse, I guess, but we might pick that apart when we get to it.
Yeah.
Obviously, I really had a good time. I don't know. I really love how dumb and simple these films are.
Yeah, they're so easy to follow.
Oh, it's so easy to follow. I love it. But I love the little tidbits of world building. So good. Okay. After the events of Chapter 2, John Wick is excommunicado, pursued through New York by every single living assassin. Wick returns to the Belarus where he grew up, calls in his ticket, and journeys to Casablanca to meet up with Sophia, a fellow assassin who owes John a marker. Meanwhile, the Adjudicator, a member of the High Council, threatens the Bowery King and Winston, requesting they both step down for their hand in helping John Wick. She also visits the Belarus and takes a pound of flesh. With Sophia's assistance, John seeks advice from the Elder, the man who sits above the high table. John ventures into the desert and wakes in the Elder's presence. John promises to kill Winston in return for his reinstatement to the high table and to remove his status as excommunicado. The Adjudicator slices the Bowery King to ribbons, having him pay for each bullet he gave John with a cut. 7 bullets, 7 cuts. Back in New York, John fights his way to Winston. Winston and John agree that they have no interest in returning to the High Table and decide instead to go to war. The Continental is deconsecrated. With the concierge's help, John fights off the High Table's forces, killing literally everyone. Finally, the adjudicator agrees to parley, realizing she's been beaten, and reinstates Winston and the Continental. Winston then immediately shoots John off the roof of the Continental. John survives, of course, and wakes up in the presence of the Bowery King, and seemingly together, they might take on even the High Table. Credits.
Yeah, there's not a lot that happens in this film.
I know, and I love it. I love how simple it is. There's so much about this that I just can't get enough of. There's an elegance in how simple the plots of these are, but there's a balancing point with that. So because the story is so simple, they can get away with so much world building,
Right.
and seeming like what in another story would be like exposition or whatever. But because they inform such simple actions, it never feels like they're overloading you.
Yeah, and even when a character is just kind of blatantly like dumping exposition, like in the when they're in Casablanca and they're talking to some guy, he just starts sort of like going on about the world, and it's like, yeah, in one hand it's like he's just dumping exposition, but it kind of just fits the way that everyone like talks in this
It's
world.
very theatrical. Like it has that style to it. There's something of like the Greek theater to the whole thing where, I mean, even we talked about it last time, but the fact that John Wick says so little is always so interesting because you always expect him to like stop and say some cool one-liner, and he just never does. And it's really interesting and satisfying when he does say something and it's never as cool and quippy as you'd like.
It's always, because, I mean, Keanu Reeves comes back with just, like, the simultaneously worst and best performance where, he like, every line he says, it sounds like he's in physical pain trying to say it. Like, he's really just trying to make his voice do things it's not really meant to do. Like, since, like, you know, like, sure, he could kind of do that in, like, the first Matrix, but it's like...
He's kind of
like,
old now.
He kind of like puts his whole head into it, where he's just like the words just kind of like vom out of his mouth.
It's very much a man who's not used to talking to other humans, and I wonder if that's Keanu Reeves as a person combined with the character he's playing. It is interesting,
like slapped in the throat one too many times. He sounds like a pack-a-day smoker.
I guess there's. I mean, one of my theories about that is that basically, like, the way that they want that character to be portrayed is now that his wife has died, like he's kind of lost all reason to actually bother interacting with people.
So he's just a bit.
So he's just kind of
weird.
Yeah, he's just like a bit of a weird guy.
Yeah.
You know. We talked about it in a previous episode about John Wick 2, but I love that everyone here is very fancy and everyone has like a very specific style based on like the kind of faction they belong to.
Yeah, everyone's like like the Continental in New York City is very much just like this ritzy, high-end
There's booze
hotel.
everywhere for some reason.
Yeah, and like the concierge is this character who's just such a... He's such a fucking... Who's Batman's butler?
Alfred.
Mr. Wayne.
Mr. Wayne.
He's such like an Alfred character, but he kind of just... Like, he doesn't die, which I like. He does things. He shoots some boys, but like... In this world, the most important fact is that he doesn't die. That's a defining character trait in this universe is not dying, because fucking everyone else seems to die.
Yeah, well, there's a lot. Yeah, there's kind of some interesting elements to that where I think that death in this universe is obviously tied to honor because of the way that the rules and things work.
Yeah,
but
we talked about this when we talked about the second film, where that control of death is like a big part of these films.
Whereas I think control of life isn't, interestingly.
Yeah.
I think the quote that capitulates the whole series as an idea is that it's a Winston Churchill quote, and he says, it was from him when he was talking about the war, and he said, when you kill a man, it costs nothing to be polite.
Right.
And I think that, for me, perfectly sums up the kind of the pathos of the series and the pathos of, like, the High Table in general, is that idea of, like, if you have to do something as awful as kill people for a living, at least do it with some dignity.
Yeah.
Which isn't to say that, I mean, there are some, I think the best, maybe segueing a little bit into the fights, because I think they relate to that kind of, it's you have honor until it's time to kill people, and then it's like, okay, now all bets are off.
Right.
John Wick kicks so many dudes in the balls.
There's a lot of just like groin mutilation.
Which I think is
in this film in general, yes.
Which is fitting because no other characters go for that. Except John Wick and the dogs, which I think there's an interesting parallel drawn there where it's like...
Oh, there's like the dogs in this. There's a lot of they play a lot with like with trained dogs. Where and like it's pretty like on the nose and kind of obvious, but there's a lot of scenes where like there's the overt scene where it's just like where what's her character's name? Sophia, where she like calls, she's just like sit and the dog sit, and she was like, I was talking to you, John Wick. That's like that sets up so many interactions later in the film where it's just like comparing people to animals.
Yeah.
When especially around this idea of like control, you know, so when John Wick does the same thing to what's his name?
You need to be more specific than that.
The knife man who's a bit of a fan.
I
guess the main villain.
I actually don't know his name.
Do we just not get his name?
We just don't like learn his name.
Sushi man.
Yeah, the sushi guy.
Call him Sushi Boy.
Hang on, I'll see if he's got a character.
See if he has a character. Where they're both in the Continental, and John Wick does the same thing to him, where it's just like sit, stay, good boy, and walks off, and then he sits, stays, good boys.
The assassin's name is just listed as Zero.
Zero. Okay.
Yeah.
But even in the motto of the high table being the rules and consequences is the only thing that separates us from the animals. Which is interesting. Yeah, it's an interesting parallel, isn't it? Where it's like all the people that John Wick seems to have an affinity for are the people that are bad at following the rules, and they tend to respect animals. There's something about that that's kind of interesting. Yeah, because you've also got the Dowry King. Dowry King?
Bowery King.
Dowry is a completely different thing.
Dowry's the thing with the wedding.
Yeah, Bowery King. Him with the pigeons. I don't know. It's just
I didn't even think about the pigeons. There's a lot going on there with like that idea of, and you know, it's kind of, again, if we're talking about Greek theater, which I think this has a lot in common with, there's an assumption, and it came from Greek theater and bled through to like Shakespeare's work as well, with this relationship between like earthiness and animals and like goodness.
Right.
You see that in Macbeth, where you know the witches kind of live on the heath and everything is like dead, and you know where they kind of boil their cauldron and they give out their fortunes. It's sort of this desecrated landscape. And then the hero of the story, Macduff, is sort of, he comes from, you know, the kingdom where there's lots of forest in Scotland, and he's sort of one with nature, whereas Macbeth, who ends up becoming the villain, is always in these castles surrounded by stone. And Greek theater was kind of obsessed with that a little bit, and I wonder if it's an easy analog for us, right? Because we associate people who are kind of one with nature and the earth as being like generally good, and then people who kind of are industrial or sort of divorced from that, we kind of have like an automatic negative connotation with that.
Yeah, I think most of that comes from just media. Like there's always been, you know, the villain is always like the big industrialized machine, and you know, you've got, you know, stuff like Pocahontas and I don't know, like every just like, I don't know, Avatar
or like Tarzan. It's always the settlers or the colonial people. And I guess this is kind of the same thing, where it's like it's the like the man, you know, the high table, the man is like the villain in this, really.
Right.
As much as Zero is and as much as the Adjudicator is, it's like the rules are the problem.
Well, I think the Adjudicator is an interesting character in this because she's, you know, so then when she comes in and she sort of does some things, you're just like, oh, she's the main villain. Like John Wick's gonna like fuck her up in the end. But like as the film goes on, it was like more and more, it's just like, yeah, she probably isn't going to die. She's probably just going to walk out. And even, you know, even when they sort of officially declare war on the high table, when she's there and she walks off, it's just like, that's like the point. It's just like, they could shoot her with the gun that they have.
In another film, they would just kill her.
Right. Like that would be the declaration of war.
Right. It's so interesting to me that there's such a like, they're so civilized about it.
Yeah.
You know, and I wonder if, because I've been trying to pass like what they're trying to do with this franchise, right? Because I thought this was going to be the final chapter, but I think what they've realized is, and maybe I think what's going to happen, this is my theory, is what they're going to do is spin this off into like a series of related in the same universe stories that aren't about John Wick. Because Keanu Reeves can't do this forever.
No, what I think is, and what I think that they're starting to build towards is that you sort of had the first couple of films where like really the big drive behind why those films were so good was just like the action is just like so perfectly choreographed, and it's just like it's really fresh. It's like a breath of fresh air from like your Bourne films and your, you know, even like your James Bonds and stuff like that. Like it's just so flashy and fun. But
but in its simple way.
Yeah, the first film was literally he's just like pissed off because some guy killed his dog. So it's like it's just so tongue in cheek. Yeah. The second film they sort of started to be more like, oh, there's this high society, and you had more of the continental stuff. And then when he's like excommunicado, you're like, oh, that's a big deal now,
right?
And in this film, they've sort of, when I was in the cinema and it was like the first 20 minutes is just him like running away and beating people up. I was like, in my mind, I was like, yeah, but where's the story? Like where, like, I was like, surely this film can't just be like, it was like this film could easily just be fight scenes for 2 hours.
Well, I was expecting the whole thing to be one chase scene.
Yeah. But it definitely kind of comes back a bit to more of like the John Wick 2 kind of stuff where it's like, we're actually going to develop this world a little bit. We're actually going to, create a bit of intrigue with sort of, the character relations, which
but do you
I think that they're moving towards that more sort of like character drama and like, where you sort of have this web of like who's with who and like who's doing what and whatever each person is trying to achieve, especially now with sort of what seems like a quote unquote betrayal by Winston. Where it's just like, oh, he's got to play. He's doing that noir thing.
And you're like, well, where's it going to leave them?
Yeah.
And I wondered too because one of
I think because the action is becoming secondary.
But I think that only works because the action is still as good.
Oh yeah.
I mean, different, which we'll get to in a minute. But I think there's an interesting point there that you made, which is that this film does something that's really cool in writing, which is you can have these characters. So when we talk about fantasy a lot and world building, we talk a lot about having worlds that feel lived in. So characters have histories and secrets and things that aren't just like, they're not part of the story. They just exist independently of what's going on.
Right.
And these films do a brilliant job of that, where when you understand how markers work and you understand how the coins work, that when like in the second film, when John Wick like goes to get a new suit from this like storage place that we've never seen before, that there's no exposition that tells you that he gives over this thing and then they get his package and he gets his suit. It's all just unspoken communication. And with the library, it's unclear whether or not that's part of the assassin network or if he just stashed that book.
Hides it in that book,
because it's not a real fairy tale, presumably, or it's so obscure that no one would look for it.
Yeah.
And it's unclear if like that's part of that world or not. But I think that's what really works about the world building they do, is that it feels just obscure enough and just obtuse enough that you're interested in the outcome of the information you learn, not just the information. And I think that's a really hard thing to do with exposition, because you can imagine in a much worse film or like a much less focused film, that same scene happens, but he goes to like, instead of going to the library to grab his belongings or whatever, he would go to like it'd be like similar to Brick. He'd go to like some expert fella who'd be like, oh, this is the info and the kit you need, or and then he'd owe someone, and it would be too complicated because he'd be like,
find his cue,
and you'd be like, well, who's this guy now? And because, like, it's so focused in that way where it's like they know when they need a character involved. Like Sophia's a brilliant addition because she feels like an extension of John's beliefs, but in a different setting.
Right.
And I think that relies on clever exposition, but also B, when you get exposition, it pays off in the actual story too. So what I love about these films, and we talked about it in chapter 2, but is they'll kind of mention something about John Wick where like there's an implication that he's done something, like killed someone in some cool way or like some impossible way. Like in the second one, it was like, I heard he killed two men with a pencil or whatever.
Yeah.
And then later on in that same film, he kills 2 dudes with a pencil.
Yeah.
And it's unclear if he did that before and that story's true, or if that someone saying that gave him the idea to do it.
Or if it's just completely like disconnected, but because John Wick the myth and John Wick the John Wick are just so like intertwined in weird ways, it's just like someone is just like, I heard he killed a guy with a pencil while he's currently killing a guy with a pencil.
Right. They do that in this film where when he's going to visit the Belarus, they make him take off his belt, like because he's got no weapons on him, but they make him take off. They're like, no, the belt as well.
Yeah.
Right. And I was like, oh, that's weird. Like, I didn't think anything of it. I was like, that's an odd thing.
Yeah,
but then later on in the film, when he's fighting Zero, he seemingly, from that exchange, gets the idea to, or he's fighting Zero's goons, gets the idea to use his belt as a weapon.
Yeah.
Like, and you go, oh, so has he done that before, and they know that story, so they've taken it away from him? Or did it give him the idea?
Yeah.
And I love that implicit reversal that doesn't have an answer. Like, it's never explained. John's never like,
done this before.
Yeah, or like it'd be like in a Jason Bourne film, or like he'd be like, oh, like like there'd be a moment where they'd show the character being like, I remember that conversation. Time to use my belt.
Well, even in the Bourne films, like there's, like I think if we're sort of looking at action fights and how a lot of these films do it, you've got your James Bond, which is just that's just like your baseline. Your run and gun. He's got some gadgets, but like really, it's just him being a suave boy. Mm-hmm. You've got your like Mission Impossible, which is just like we're going ham, like it's just rifles and shotguns and running around and motorcycles. Tom Cruise doing his thing,
breaking his ankles.
But then you've got like the Bourne films, which is like it's messy, it's rough, it's like improvised. Like he'll kill a man with a pencil, but like it's not. It's just because the pencil was there.
It's there.
It's not because he's such a badass that he can kill a guy with a pencil. It's just
he's
like
got no other
options.
He's
got no other options.
Literally he kills a guy with a chair leg in the first film, and it's one of the hardest things in cinema to watch. Like,
but with this, it's like not improvised, and it's not sort of standard. It's in that weird stylistic, and again, like with the first two films. It's very you can see the style because it's using guns, and we know how gunfights go. It's pew pew pew, get behind cover, pew pew,
and they kind of change that up.
They were just like, no, we're gonna do like a gun fight scene like it's like a Marvel fisticuff scene.
What did they like? It's like gung fu or something.
Oh, gun kata.
Yeah,
so like gun kata is this jokey term. It came from some like really trashy film that was trying to rip off. It had Christian Bale. That was trying to rip off The Matrix. It was like 2002. It was called like something, but where like Christian Bale's character is like, they'll just be like deploy him, and he'll like slide into a room with like all the lights off, and then he's just like pew 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 pew. Like that's what gun kata is, and this is like the evolution, like the modernized gun kata. But in this film, there's not a lot of that. There ain't a lot of it.
It's a lot of knife fights.
There's a lot of knife fights. Look, my theory is that they had so. In terms of like the way this film was made, you can see it in the film. There's like one group of about 6 to 7, 8 guys who are just all of the bad guys in them. Like if like every guy on the motorcycle when they have the knives, like at the start of the film where he's just being chased down by like generic Asian guys. All of Sushi Man's Zero's, all of his students. Even like when they're in Casablanca. Even those guys, it's the same guys. They're just wearing head masks, so you can't see them, but you can see the eyes, and the eyes give it away. Because you can kind of figure it out. I'm not being racist, I swear. There was one guy who was just like, that's the same guy from like an early scene. I was just like, oh, it's the same guy.
Yeah, they had like the one...
But they clearly had this crew of like stuntmen who were like insanely talented, and they were like... knife fighting.
Every scene.
And
I guess that works well when you have someone like the main, like, because Keanu Reeves does a lot of his own stuff in these.
Oh yeah, he does all his own stuff.
Except
for there's like one scene where he's riding a motorcycle, where it's not him.
It's clearly not him. But
like, he'll do his fight scenes. He just won't do fight scenes on a motorcycle.
He's Tom Cruise in it for sure.
He is a little bit.
There's definitely an element to that utilization of those same people that I think. It works really well because it means that by the end of the film, you have a really clear idea of John Wick's abilities when it comes to fighting those kinds of combatants. So that when you have that fight with Zero, you understand implicitly that John can't rely on, his like
blah blah.
He's like shooting, and he can't rely on like his knife skills. He has to actually use the Baba Yaga stuff to his advantage. Right. So the reason he wins is that he goes, oh, like I can outplay this guy. Well, I can out wrestle him, and I can out John Wick him. Yeah. He's trying to do the disappearing thing. I invented that. And that's actually what gives him the upper hand in the end.
Yeah.
And I think when we're talking about like, oh, it was the same group of stunt people, from an audience perspective, it meant that when that fight happened, I knew that he would need to do something different.
Right.
Which, whereas in the other ones, it definitely felt like when you get to the end fight, it's like, we just need to shoot someone. And the question at the end of the second one is, will he do it in the Continental?
Like, because there's no traditional gun fight scene in this film. Like, the only, like, big set-piece gunfights are the one with Sophia, which is, like, mostly about her and the dogs. The dogs are great.
God, that is honestly such a cool piece of action. When she's like,
because like those dogs
are dope.
Mostly practical.
There's one shot that
when the dog jumps up the wall?
No,
that's CG.
No, that didn't do it for me. There was one shot where I was like, holy crap, that's cool. Where it's a wide angle shot, and she's running, and she she slides under a cart and the dogs go around it.
Yeah.
And then she comes up and they drop her and she goes bang, bang.
Yeah.
And I was like, fuck, that's cool.
Yeah, those
like,
dogs
it's
were cool.
so well executed.
But like that gun scene is like, it's mostly her. And then you've got the other one with the people raiding the Continental, and it's a really interesting choice to make them like bulletproof. Because like in my brain, I was just like, this is just a video game. Like,
It did seem like a boss level.
yeah,
like the level
where
before the
it's just,
final
like,
boss.
suddenly, you know, it's just another fight scene, but all the enemies are bulletproof, and you have to like stagger them and then do like a staggered takedown move. Like, it's literally, it was like, and like I don't mind. Like it was definitely more interesting. Where it's just like, oh, they're bulletproof.
It was more engaging, and it was also harder to watch because you were like, oh, is he gonna like? You're like, oh, like the whole time I was like, is he gonna, you know?
Yeah, and then they whip out the shotguns, and it's
Oh
just
my
fucking disgusting.
There was a moment where, when the first shotgun went off, literally everyone in the cinema
Everyone's
went,
like, oh!
it was so funny.
Oh god, like the violence in this film is fucking horrendous.
Oh,
the
knife fights,
the knife fight at the
oh.
very start,
When he
where
kills that guy with knives?
They just keep throwing knives. There's about 20 knives thrown in that one scene, and one dude just cops about 10 of them.
It's
like,
it's an interesting rendering of that too, because it's not like in any other, like if it was just like a James Bond film or whatever.
It'd be like one knife.
It'd be one knife would kill
like
you.
a cool, and it'd be like loaded, like shown on it.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is that like there's a bunch of knives that get thrown by the bad guys that just completely don't work.
Yeah, well,
Like,
same
they
with
just
John.
bounce off it.
And it's like, because that's how knives work.
And
If
he's
you
just
don't,
like, you just keep
because it's hard.
fucking
You gotta.
trying.
It's like it's
Throwing knives
basically
is not easy. Yeah.
also like it's not a guaranteed kill, and
Yeah.
that's kind of cool. Same with like gunshots and stuff. But that's kind of why I like that fight scene with the, you know, when they're wearing the bulletproof armor or whatever.
right.
Because seemingly what they realize is like, there's no amount of technology that can save you from John Wick. like
Right.
you could blow up the building and he probably, like, they blow up his house in the second one and he's fine.
He's fine.
Like you can't kill him.
The shot of him falling off the building,
Ah.
not as impactful as the time they did it in John Wick
when he
2, when he just falls and just lands immediately. And I think in this one, because it's a wide angle and they show him bouncing on things on the way down, it's kind of like, this is...
It feels a bit more like a movie.
Yeah, like it's hard to explain, because it's, you know, when you see someone, it's like watching a Jackie Chan film. Well, like when Jackie Chan, when he does his like crazy stunts where he'll like jump off buildings and like slide down rails and like break every bone in his body, he'll sort of do it in steps. He'll go like bit by bit by bit, because that's how he fucking stayed alive while breaking every bone in his body. So like, yeah,
He's not a healthy man these days.
So seeing him like, you know, do that bounce, I was just like, that looks like it hurts, and he might be dead, but like, he's clearly not, because he's John Wick. But like in the John Wick 2, it is just like, thud. You're just like, what the fuck?
But I think that works because you see it. One of the things that these films do that they capture well is the slowness with which real pain exerts itself.
Right.
So usually, like in that scene, for instance, he hits the ground. And then he's immediately moving, but he very, very slowly rolls over. And there's something, they do it a bit in this where like when he has a really bad like little moment, he definitely reacts slowly to it. But that in particular, because you don't see his reaction, because they're playing it for, obviously it's fucking John Wick, it's the Baba Yaga, he's gonna vanish.
Right.
But they play it for that effect because of the whole thing with Zero. The whole setup of this film is that he can vanish anywhere. Yeah. So it works brilliantly as a bit of exposition payoff. But because we don't see him react, it doesn't feel like it has that same impact. Because normally in another film, they'd fall and then there's a cutaway and then they have to get up and fight immediately. But in this, it's like when that kind of thing happens, like, you know, when he falls through this, when he knocks Zero's goons through the glass floor, and they all land.
Yeah.
And he just lies there for a minute being like, fuck me. And then he slowly gets up. Yeah. That's kind of what I thought would have been cool. It's just give us that breathing time to see how hurt he is. Right. And that he still keeps going. Yeah. I don't know. It felt like there could have been some more room there, but I also like the payoff with the vanishing stuff, which is something that we talked about in the second one that they didn't commit to. Because in the second one, when he tries to vanish, they do that cool train shot where he's facing off against someone and the train passes by and he like vanishes, and then in between the frames you can see him.
Yeah, in this one they kind of they instead of pretending to do the thing and then just like like they actually did the proper vanish. And to a certain degree it's like, nah, I'm not a huge fan of it.
I don't think it. I think it nearly outstayed its welcome. I think if they'd done it once or twice more,
I think in a lot of the fight scenes, there was just a weird amount of repetition, and not the
Yeah.
kind of repetition that was natural or would sort of lead to like a conclusion, but the kind of repetition where they just seem to be doing the same thing.
is that because it was the same stunt team? Do you think?
I think it might have been, but even when it wasn't the stunt team, so like with the gunfight with the dogs, it was a lot of like every character just got bit in the groin. Like it was always the same move of like dog grabs her, she like caps them. It was like dog kick, like cap, dog
It felt far less improvised.
Yeah,
I
and
guess.
and I don't know whether that's just down to
Well, that we've seen two of them before. Like,
yeah, I don't know. It was I don't think the fight scenes were as good. Probably the best one was that first one with the throwing knives, because that was like the conceit for this fight is that there are no guns. They're just in a room filled with knives.
just so many knives.
And it's just like, go, like, just go have fun. Like, all of the John Wick films have that element of just like, all right, here's the setup, here's what John Wick is, here's what the bad guys are. Like, all right, go have fun. Which is why I think that the fight in the Continental is really interesting, because it's like interesting setup with like these bulletproof characters. You've got sort of the two stages where it's just like, first they're like really on the back foot, and then they just upgrade, and it's just like a pure power
You get
trip.
the BFG.
Yeah.
I wonder. Yeah, it's an interesting
But
thought.
like with the dog fight scene, it was like, okay, it's just like pistol shooting that we've seen before. Even like they do like Chekhov's molten metal, and like it just doesn't go anywhere. And I was like, when that scene was starting up and they showed like the pouring of the molten metal, I was just like, dude, we get some sick fights. Some boy's gonna land in that molten metal.
Gonna land in that.
And it doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
The dog just runs over it, and that's it. And I was like,
yeah, I was kind of.
and then it was just them shooting people who kind of had knives, kind of had pistols with pistols.
It never
It's
really.
just like,
yeah.
the dogs were cool. Don't get me wrong. The dogs were cool. But they did like 3 things about 12 times.
I think if that was half the length, it would have been good. It just felt like it went on.
Yeah, and I think that's like most of the fight scenes tended to kind of go on, and a lot of them didn't really conclude well. Like the fight before he fights Zero, he has the fight against the 2 guys who are just punching and kicking and like hiding and reappearing, and you're like, okay, cool. But then there's like another fight with another 2 guys, but these guys actually have character. And they actually developed a little bit, where it's just like, oh, we think you're really cool, so we're gonna like help you up.
Why
and
wasn't
stuff.
it just one?
Why wasn't it? It should have been just those 2,
and
just
spent more
the 2
time
guys.
with them.
Yeah, who are like, we think you're really cool, and at the payoff being, I'm not gonna kill you, because like that's kind of cool. You're like, I like that, because they're like kind of cool characters
Also,
by the end of it.
It shows that like he's not like everyone else.
Yeah, I think.
But then I wonder if, because thinking about like that Zero fight, what I like about the setup of that room and what I really enjoyed is that it was I enjoyed the combination of the samurai swords plus the bulletproof glass that they couldn't cut through.
Well,
that made for some really cool shots where and I think from a cinematography perspective in that fight scene, I thought that was the most dynamic element, and I was like, why wasn't that the whole thing?
But even like, there's weird stuff where they keep teasing these weird setups where like, the knife, like when he's fighting with the knives, there's a lot of shots of like the knives really like scraping the shit out of the windows. So it's like, all right, these knives are pretty sharp. And then there's like that shot where the way it's shown is like they're behind these panes of glass and they keep banging against the glass, and it's like John Wick bangs into it, and then Zero bangs into it, and then John bangs into it, and you're like, who's gonna fall through it? And it's like, when one of them does fall through it, it's like, it just doesn't really go anywhere. And you're like, oh, okay, what was the point of that setup then? Like,
I felt like that was
all these ideas where it's just like, the knife does this to the glass, and you're like, cool. And then it's like, all right, moving on. We're going to bang against this glass. It's going to be rickety. You're like, oh, what's going to happen? It's just like, they just kind of go through the glass. Like, there was...
it felt like at some point, John should have gone through a glass cabinet, and that should have been it. Like, I was waiting for that moment where like, he can get knocked through any piece of glass, but this glass is going to be a problem for him.
Yeah, and I was almost predicting the end of the fight to be like Zero getting thrown out the window, like through the glass. Like, I was like, it's gonna, like, there's so much glass going on here. John Wick's been thrown through so many fucking glass cabinets. Like, glass is gonna play a major part in this final fight. It's like, no, it's just like he's got weird gloves that can stop blades, and then he gets stabbed through the chest.
I was like, yeah, it did feel a bit
And-
like, and I know that not everything in a fight scene has to be a Chekhov's gun, but when you spend that much time with the glass,
Spend that much time with the glass.
at least have John Wick stab him in the throat with glass or something.
Right.
Give me something. You know what I mean?
And I think with the first two films, because it was just guns and there was no one that was bulletproof, they were able to, the kind of setups that they had, like, I don't know. And they did the cool thing in this film where they were both underwater, and I was like, they better fucking do it.
That was a cool shot.
Yeah, because I was sitting there, I was just like, oh, they're underwater. They're probably going to do the thing with the fact that bullets don't go very far underwater. And of course, the guy's like, poo, and his bullets are like, boo, 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 boo. And it's like, that's what bullets look like when they go through water. You know, there's like a Mythbusters episode of that. Bullets just, woof, like they go nowhere. If you get close enough, sure. But that was interesting. And then it's like, all right, we're just going to continue. It's like he gets out of the bath. And you're like, there's a scene in John Wick 2 where like they're in the bath for a good 10 minutes. Like duking it out in the bath. He's half naked. It's like a big deal. And it's
really
like
good.
That kind of thing where it's in this film, they seem almost just, and this is mainly with the fight scenes. Like this is mainly with the fight scenes where they seem to just be like jumping between different things, and there's no like main conceit with any of them. Like except for like the dog one where they're dogs. I guess the knife one where they're knives, and the bulletproof guys.
Yeah, but even like I see what you're saying. Even like tying them together, like in the previous ones, I felt like each film had its own conceit for how those action beats were going to play out. Which I don't hate that this one didn't, because it was more focused on like the character work. But it does feel like if they're going to do this and have it work moving forward, it needs to be that each film they pick a conceit and then keep like evolving that conceit.
Yeah. Like I don't think this film had any standout fights like the first two.
I just thought it would have been, for me, it was probably that knife fight at the start and elements of the dog fight.
But I think the knife fight at the start was just like more impactful, mainly because it was just like welcome back. This is John Wick.
It went pretty hard though, even like, for a John Wick fight. I don't know. For me, it did.
Like, but it's. I think all of the John Wick fights, if you go to them from, you know, we like the last film we watched was Endgame. You know, like going from Avengers Endgame to this, like it is a ramp
we watched
up.
the Nice Guys last week. Like, yeah, I think you're right.
I think it's just like we forgot how violent these films are,
and I love it. Yeah. They definitely are more interested in the thematic stuff and the characters now, and interested in developing the philosophy of this universe.
Yeah, which I'm fine with.
Yeah, it's fine.
Like, if it's very telling that they're actually they've commissioned, so they're releasing a video game for the John Wick series. It's like same universe, not following like a movie tie-in or anything, but it's like video game, the John Wick series. It's so take a wild guess what genre the game is. Just like real quick, just like what's your first thought? John Wick video game. What is it?
Like, I assume like a cool shooter.
Yeah, no, not at all. It's a strategy game.
Is it a mobile game?
No, it's a strategy game.
What?
It's a strategy game made by the guys that did Thomas Was Alone, which is a narrative-driven puzzle game. They're just like, yeah, John Wick isn't an action series.
Interesting.
So we're not going to make an action game. It's a strategy game.
I guess that's
And it's like, not only does like the combat, you can sort of see where like the strategy side in the fight scenes come from, but also just like the interaction he has with all the characters. Where like everyone was just like, when do I use this coin? When do I use the mark?
Right.
When do I do the thing?
Because it's a neo-noir.
What choice do I make?
It's a neo-noir thriller. Like it's a noir story.
With really good action.
It's really good action. And I had a great time in this. And every time I watch one of these, it just makes me think more about action films as a vehicle that like, because you could just watch this and like turn your brain off if you want.
Oh God, absolutely.
But even
Maybe
when
watch like the first one though, because that's like the real turn your brain.
But even when I turn my brain off when I watch these, I come out of them being like, oh, but all of this stuff. Because like I was watching it being like, yes, like I just like zoned out. I was like, I was a zombie the whole time, right? I was like, yeah, kill him. Like I have a great time in these films. But I came out of it and my brain was like, there's so much going on here.
Yeah.
Like it's brilliant. I think it's tricking a bunch of people into really enjoying complex world-building, and I love that.
We gotcha,
bitches.
Gotcha, good.
Man, I love these films.
And there's another one coming out, most likely.
Yeah. Keanu Reeves is getting too old for this shit. Do you have any recommendations for this week?
Eurovision.
That's not.
No, it is. That is.
Okay.
Yep, Eurovision.
Yeah, it's.
The songs are good.
Yeah.
The Eurovision is good. I have to get up very early tomorrow morning.
You don't have to.
No, I do. because Eurovision's on.
You're a mess, mate.
Australia got through to the finals.
Did they?
Boy. Yep.
Nice, dude. What have I even been doing? I've been new season of Easy is out, which I've been watching. It's quite good. That's kind of it. I finished off Ricky Gervais's Afterlife Netflix show. Fuck, that's so good. Honestly, I think everyone needs to watch it. It's brilliant. It's very funny, but it's also just got a lot going on, like thematically, and the way that it explores like mental health. Is fucking fascinating. So check that. Pat, you just get the crap out of me.
Noises.
Otherwise, where can people find us?
Facebook.
At DCMWorks Social.
YouTube.
YouTube.com/DCMWorks.
Twitter.
At DCM_works.
Patreon.
Patreon.com/DCMWorks. We're adding some new tiers soon with the release of a new video we've got coming up. I don't know when it'll be out, maybe in like a month when I've kind of finished on it. So
I, for one, know what these tiers are.
Keep an eye out for that. TBC on that one. The patrons are going to get an early access look at that video and the new tiers. But suffice it to say that you get a bunch of behind-the-scenes content. You get access to like over 60 plus hours of additional content. There's some stuff that's very behind the scenes. There's some stuff that's like, a bit more interesting.
Yikes.
And you get some. You also get access to some discounts for some of our stores for my book. And also you get access to the post show, which is an extra 20 minutes of this program. We're not doing one this week because it's late as heck.
Fucking tired.
But I recommend checking out last week's, where we sort of picked apart Tuka and Birdie, because we're not really going to do an episode on it.
No, because I don't think we're qualified.
But if you enjoy
having an X and a Y chromosome.
Yeah, but if you enjoy our BoJack chats, I highly recommend. I don't know, man.
I don't know biology.
I'm not a geneticist, dog. Yeah, go check that out. Our subscriptions start at $3 a month. Get access to everything with $3. And we view it more as a subscription to get additional content rather than a donation. So you can go check that out. Otherwise, if you want to follow us individually, I'm at DCM I Hate Pie.
I'm Alador Citrus.
I'll see you guys next week.